We begin this edition of the SportsMax Zone talking West Indies cricket as the Caribbean side gets ready to take on Bangladesh in the second game of their two-match test series, which bowls off at Savannah Park in Jamaica on Saturday. That's tomorrow. The Caribbean side secured a convincing win in the first encounter at the Sir Vivian Richards Stadium in Antigua and Barbuda earlier this week, wrapping up the 201-run victory early on Tuesday's final day. Reflecting on the loss in the first test, Bangladesh captain Mahidi Hassan Miraz revealed exactly where his team went wrong. We know what mistakes were made. They got a partnership after they were down by 7 wickets, and then the match was lost there, he said. On the other hand, West Indies vice-captain Joshua Da Silva knows exactly what will bring the hosts a series win.
Raw pace and talent. Led very well by Kima Azari. We have the newcomers like Shama. We have Jaden, who's been around a little while but still learning his trade. But the pace is there, and you can see the fear they put into the batsmen's eyes. We took 18 wickets only because they declared the first inning and then declared the second inning as well. So for us, it's about using that advantage that we have, and hopefully we can make that the reason we make it 2-0.
Mikel Chandani joins us via Zoom to discuss first of all, whether or not there'll be a match. Because, Mikel, what's the weatherman saying about Savannah Park on Saturday?
Yeah, well, I think all of us are in Jamaica, so we are able to see, how wet conditions are. I had an opportunity to go down to the ground today, and to be honest, first of all, I want to say I'm extremely pleased about the surface. It's the most grass I've seen on a West Indian pitch in a long time. I think both teams will be quite excited about that given their pace attacks. But the outfield, given how much rain you've had over the last week, as you both know, is extremely wet. So I'm looking outside right now. It's not looking too sunny, and the game starts tomorrow morning, so I'm not too sure.
The outfield is going to be green. Of course, it's been weeks of rain, not just last week. It's been about 2 months of rain for the last 2 months. But what does the pitch look like? Have you had an idea of what we're looking at? Is it going to be quick? Is it going to be slow? Is it going to be sticky? What's the take on what the pitch will be like tomorrow?
Yeah, it is filled with an even covering of light green grass, which I think is great for the West Indies' chances, given that you heard Joshua Da Silva talk about the fact that the Pacers took all 18 wickets in the test match. It's literally hard to find a spot without grass on that surface. And I remember watching the 2021 test match, the last time the West Indies played test cricket at Savannah Park. And I look back at the numbers in that series, 66 out of 70 wickets were taken by the pace bowlers in that Pakistan-West Indies series. And that was a surface that wasn't this swell grass. So I think it's going to be quite exciting, and I think it comes down to which team can bat the seam attack better, because Bangladesh, as much as the West Indies, have quite a menacing pace attack, as we saw in the first test.
So we're looking at a 5-man pace attack like we saw in the first test. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I find it hard to see the West Indies changing their pace attack, given that they went with without the specialist spinner, and it sort of worked really well for them. This pitch looked even quicker than what we had in Antigua. So I expect them to keep things probably the same. And I expect Bangladesh as well to probably bring in one Nahid Rana, who is probably one of their quickest bowlers ever, and has the ability to get up to 150 kilometers per hour.
About the batting, though, Nikhil, I mean, there are concerns about the form of West Indies captain Craig Brathwaite. He hasn't looked particularly convincing in recent times, not just the first test. He's been struggling for a while. It is unlikely that he'll be substituted out for somebody else, because then the pickings are kind of slim. But how do you see the West Indies setting up in terms of their batting, especially given what you're saying about the possibility of being a pace-friendly pitch?
Yeah, I think, first of all, he will hope that he's not subbed out, because he's about to equal the record with Sir Garfield Sobers as the most consecutive matches played by a West Indian at 85 test matches in a row. So that in itself is an amazing feat. But look, I think both teams will require more from their top three, especially. No team was able to put on more than 35 runs without losing 2 wickets in the test match. So that in itself is a concern. But I also think the struggles that Craig Brathwaite and Casey Carty to a lesser extent and the West Indian top order have had, pretty much going back to the South Africa test match, it gives Bangladesh a great opportunity. Let's say they win the toss and put the West Indies in early. We expect there to be some moisture. It's like to be overcast conditions tomorrow or the day after as well. So they have a great chance to maybe, limit the West Indies to 50 for 4, 50 for 5, like we saw when they got bowled out for 152, and take control of the game. Obviously, they will have to bat a lot better than they did in both innings, but I think the surface brings them into the game as much as it does the West Indies because of the exciting pace showing that we saw in the first test. So, yeah, Craig Brathwaite will want to come good. We've seen him in this position before where 2019 and 2020 were lean periods, and the next 2 years after that, he was able to bounce back. So hopefully this can be the start from a West Indian perspective of him getting back into the runs.
Yeah, Nikhil, let's talk about the man we just saw on screen, Casey Carty. You mentioned him briefly. Very good in one-day international cricket, where he's averaging over 40 for the West Indies, including a century and a few half-centuries there. Not the case in the longest form of the game. 3 test matches for him so far, yet to produce a half-century for the West Indies. How important is this match going to be for him?
It's massive, Ricardo. I think, obviously, he's very new into his test career, and there will be some leeway given to him in trying to find his feet in the format. But I do think that there are others knocking on the door in the first-class setup, and this is not to say that he would be dropped or anything, but I do think that there is a pressure on him to try to find that right tempo and that right rhythm required for test match cricket. It was actually very good to see the way Bangladesh bowled to him and set him up. In the first innings, they sort of made sure that they were quite wide of the crease to him and tempted him because it's a shot he likes to play with the ball wide of off stump, and then went straight to him and got him out. And then the second innings used that straight to dismissal to play on his mind and went wide. And of course, he gave in after a series of dot balls to play that late cut, which was to his detriment. So he's going to have to try to find that better rhythm between, obviously, the 50-over format. He's a player that likes to score and likes to be positive. But there are periods, especially batting in the top 3, where he's going to have to be okay with absorbing pressure and not necessarily scoring as often. And in both occasions, in both innings, Bangladesh sort of used that tendency against him.
Yeah, very much the case. And I'm interested to know in terms of the West Indies training session today, because they cancelled training on Thursday because of the rain. But how much catching practice did they do in training today, especially those men in the slips and gully are expected to be in those positions after the first test? I'm sure Shamar Joseph probably led the catching practice if there was such a session.
Yeah, there was catching practice, Ricardo, at the beginning of the session. There always is catching for that West Indies test team, so I'm not sure what happened exactly, but I also did see Mikel Louie working with assistant coach Jamal Smith after practice. Specifically, he's someone that has occupied the gully position in that first test match. And look, I think there are a few factors in this test away from batting and bowling that could play a big part. One, obviously, is the catching. We saw Bangladesh put down a few chances. They dropped Alec Afternaves a couple of times early in his innings. And then the West Indies, as we mentioned, put down 4 chances in Shamar Joseph's first spell on day 4, which was obviously not ideal. And I think that could play a big part, but also the running between the wickets and the slowish outfield, because it really will be hard work. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of boundaries, especially early on in this test match.
Yeah, of course, we're expecting a lot of pace to the Bangladeshi batsmen. Do you suspect, Nikhil, that they have the quality to withstand what will be coming at them at Sabina Park?
I think they need to probably get in one of Shadman Islam, who is their other opening option, as well as maybe Islam Ankon, who is their middle order option, because people are saying maybe they play the extra batter in place of one of their spinners. I see it hard to believe that they're going with just the 4 bowlers, but I do think it's a batting lineup that's quite timid and obviously very foreign to these pace bowling conditions. There are a few positives they can take. Jakir Ali, I think the way he's, as you said, withstood the pace bowling of the West Indies in both innings is a big positive. But someone in that top 4, other than Liton Das, other than Mominul Haq, is going to have to put their hand up. So it's going to be very tough for them. I do think their best chance of winning is probably relying on their pace bowling to make sure that they have sort of a low score to go after, but they will take confidence from being able to bat the entirety of day 3. However, this at Sabina Park, this surface is very different to what we saw in Antigua, and I think it's going to be a lot more challenging for their batters.
Interesting. It was also interesting from my standpoint to hear the captain speak about losing the match because of the partnership between Justin Graves and Kemar Roach, the West Indies, 7 down, and that easily could have been a total of under 300. And West Indies bowled out for 152 then in the second innings. I don't know if you've gotten an idea of how the West Indies camp is internalizing what happened in that second innings, because a repeat of that in the Sabina Park test, and you could be looking at a significantly closer match, as Leighton pointed out in the opening.
Tell you what, Ricardo, I was surprised to see the amount of shots and sixes that were being hit today at practice. So maybe that's one way to try to be positive. But I do think there are concerns around the batting. The fast bowling has led them to pretty much both their test victories this year, the one in Australia and the one in Antigua. But whilst the fast bowling has had a resurgence, they haven't got consistent runs. I mean, only 200s in the entire year, along with 16 50s is a concern. It's the joint lowest in the world of all teams. And you look at teams like Sri Lanka who have 1200s in the same 9 test matches. So it is a problem. And I think having guys spend time at the crease in partnership has also been a concern, which is why it was good to see 200-plus run partnerships. But again, I keep saying it, the fact that the West Indies batting lineup has been so vulnerable at different times this year, and to fast bowling as well, quality fast bowling like we saw from Taskin Ahmed, I think it keeps Bangladesh in the test match and, of course, in the test series.
To your point about time at the crease, we saw Mikel Louie and, of course, Alec Athanaze both get out in the 90s in the last test match. From my perspective, I thought they gave their wickets away. Would you be aware of whether or not there have been conversations within that camp about game awareness and, of course, not internalizing that kind of pressure? Because you're playing a test match. It's not like you're running out of overs. Both batsmen could have eased their way through those 90s, or the nervous 90s, whatever they want to call it, to get to hundreds. Because this is not the first time Athanaze has thrown his wicket away in the 90s. And, of course, Louis batting well and batting long, then throw away the perfect opportunity for a maiden test century. Jan, do you think that Kohli would be having a conversation about, should they find themselves in a similar situation, what the solutions are to getting out of those nervous 90s and probably going on to score hundreds? Because we saw Justin Graves do exactly what they should have done, but just to be patient and work your way through.
Well, to be fair to both of them, they were both quite honest speaking after the 90s, and both of them acknowledged that, it's not something that they've experienced enough of, and they do feel the pressure when they're in the 90s. I think one big thing that came out of Justin Graves' innings was the way he said he kind of just tries to put the team first and focuses less on the individual milestone, which obviously would put less pressure on himself. But Jimmy Adams did say, he is not worried about the fact that both of them were dismissed in the 90s, because he thinks all of these experiences, and it's something he, Brian Lara, Shiv Narine Chanapal, were able to experience more of at the first-class level, which is where maybe guys like Mikel Louie, who's just played one season of first-class cricket, has not had enough opportunity and experience to go through things like this. So he didn't seem quite worried. I think he was more happy with the fact that they got deeper into the innings. And for Athanaze, I think it's hard to criticize his mode of dismissal because of the fact that this was how he played to get himself to, into the 90s. And for Louis, it was a bit more uncharacteristic. And I think it was quite obvious that it was a rush of blood, and that pressure Bangladesh were able to put onto him, because we must give them credit as well, the way they made him work for his last 15 to 20 runs. So yeah, I think both guys will learn. And as you said, Justin Graves' mentality about putting the team first, I think that is probably the better way that the top order will want to go about things when they're in those situations.
One quick follow-up to that, because, Athanaze got to the 90s by playing those shots. But one of the things that, and the Australians do this very well, is about risk assessment in terms of your shot selection. Low risk for high rewards and vice versa. Is that something that maybe both of those gentlemen can take into consideration, especially Athanaze, because that lap shot that he tried, I mean, I'm sitting watching, and I know I'm not in that space and I'm not feeling his pressure, but the selection of that shot was a high risk shot for low reward, because the most he could have gotten for that shot, because there was a man at third man, wasn't it? Shot third man. So therefore, that was a high-risk shot for a low percentage yield. So is that something that maybe they can be more cognizant of?
Well, just speaking about Athens in particular, obviously the reason he's gone down to number 5 in the batting order is because he is clearly wanting to take risks in his batting. And I mean, it was evident in both innings where against the spin, he played shots, right? The biggest discussion point around that is probably, as you said, the situation. Not necessarily that he was in the 90s, because I think if we are saying that we want guys to focus more on the team and what the team requires as opposed to the milestones, then we can't necessarily ask him to shut up shop when they get to the 90s. But the bigger point probably was that Mikel Louie was dismissed a couple overs ago. You're almost nearing the end of the day. And ideally, what he needs to be saying is, I want to be there to the end of the day because I know we'll be in a commanding position. And obviously, that playing that high-risk shot, as soon as Louis was dismissed, ended up in him being out, and it let Bangladesh almost back into the game where they had a good opportunity before that partnership with Roach and Graves. So probably a bit of more situational awareness, and he needs to be a bit more aware of what's happening around him if he's to put the team first and do what the team requires most of him. But in terms of that aggressive, high-risk approach, I don't expect to see much different from him, especially when there's some semblance of a start from that top order. Because even in the second innings, when they were 39 for 3, him and Hodge were able to get through to the lunch period with playing low-risk shots. But as soon as lunch was finished, you saw him playing shots again.
Yeah, and you know what, Nikhil and Leighton as well, because we've had this discussion on so many occasions this year, that we have to be patient with this team and a lot of these players, because in my opinion at least, balance takes time. And you have someone like Alec Athanaze who likes to play a shot, and to me that is fine. There were points, when you look back at the Australia series, for example, for me, the successful players were the ones who were willing to take on the bowling attack. Same when the team went to England. West Indies looked awful with the bat until they decided that they would be more positive. But being more positive comes with more risks. And that means in terms of now finding a balance, it will take more time. Let us also not forget that Mikel Louie was in the 90s for quite a while before he played the shot that he did. And let's be honest, on a couple of other occasions in the innings, that was a successful shot. So it's not as if it was a shot that is outside of his realm of capabilities. So I just think sometimes we have to take all these things into consideration and give the players time and in some cases leeway to learn. Because as you pointed out, Nikhil, they don't have 50, 60 matches at the first-class level before they get into Test cricket. And so a lot of it is a learning experience, and it's a lot of pressure for these players. But I personally like where they are going, certainly in terms of their approach. For me, I've always preferred a more positive approach. Positive doesn't mean reckless, but we might see situations from time to time that we consider to be reckless, but I think we have to give the players time to learn and to improve and learn from many of their mistakes. And that will take time to find that balance. That's me. Oh, apparently that's us too. Nikhil, by the way, quickly, have you had any time to go around Kingston and enjoy yourself a little? Yet, since you've been here 2 days.
No, Ricardo, I have not. Yeah, I've been told about a few places, but the rain has had other ideas, so I've been inside my room preparing for the game.
Don't let the rain stop you, bro. There is so much enjoyment even in the rain.
Maybe if I had a good friend who I thought was my friend living in Kingston, maybe he would have carried me around, but I guess I don't have a good friend in Kingston.
Leighton, why is he doing you like that? Let's take a break, Nikhil. Enjoy yourself.
Please.
Don't worry.
Thank you, brother.
We'll go
Cheers.
around Kingston one of these years. We'll be back with more on the SportsMax Zone.